People always said I looked like I was hiding something. The truth was, I didn't even know who I was hiding anymore. At 19 years old, I had mastered the art of disappearing. Not physically. I still attended university, worked weekend shifts at a neighborhood bookshop, and smiled politely whenever someone looked my way. But emotionally, I lived behind an invisible wall. I was the quiet boy in every classroom, the one teachers forgot to call on because he never volunteered, the one classmates barely remembered after the semester ended. My name was Ethan Carter, or at least, that was the name everyone knew. Every morning began exactly the same. The alarm buzzed at 6:30. I stared at the ceiling for several minutes, convincing myself to get out of bed, and rehearsed the same promise I'd made for years. Today I'll be different. Every evening ended the same way too. Maybe tomorrow. My father believed confidence could be built through discipline. Every conversation with him sounded like a lecture. Stand up straight. Speak louder. People respect confidence, Ethan. If only confidence were that simple. My mother tried harder to understand me, but even she had stopped asking why I preferred staying in my room instead of going to parties or joining friends after class. It's just who he is, she'd tell relatives with an apologetic smile. Those words hurt more than anyone realized, because I wasn't sure who I was. University wasn't much better. Groups formed naturally around louder personalities, while I floated between conversations like an invisible ghost. During presentations, my hands trembled so badly I could barely hold my notes. Whenever someone complimented another student, "You're so confident. You have amazing style. Everyone likes you." I couldn't stop comparing myself. I wasn't handsome. I wasn't athletic. I wasn't funny. I wasn't memorable. I was simply there, existing, watching everyone else seem comfortable inside their own skin. There was only one place where I felt strangely calm: the university theater. Not on stage, behind it. I worked part-time helping organize costumes, moving props, repairing old jackets and dresses, steaming outfits before performances. Nobody noticed me there. Nobody expected me to be interesting. I could quietly spend hours surrounded by wardrobes filled with hundreds of different lives. Kings, detectives, doctors, pirates, queens. Every costume represented someone else. Someone confident, someone brave, someone worth noticing. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering what it would feel like to become someone completely different, even if only for a few hours. Then I'd laugh at myself. It was ridiculous. Costumes didn't change people. Everything changed one rainy Thursday afternoon. I was sorting dresses for the theater department when someone walked into the costume room carrying 3 coffee cups. Rachel Morgan. Unlike me, Rachel filled every room she entered without trying. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. People simply listened when she spoke. She was 22, directed student productions, and somehow managed to remember everyone's names, including mine. Ethan. I looked up, surprised she'd recognize me beneath a pile of clothing racks. "I brought coffee," she smiled. "For me. You've been helping us every week for almost a year." She handed me 1 cup. I figured someone should finally say thank you. I stared at the coffee for a moment. Nobody had ever brought me coffee before. It seemed like such a tiny gesture. Yet somehow, it felt enormous. Over the next few weeks, Rachel began talking to me whenever she visited the costume department. Not forced conversations, real ones. She asked about my classes, my favorite books, my plans after university. When I admitted I didn't really have any plans, she didn't laugh. She simply nodded thoughtfully. "You spend too much time believing you don't matter." The sentence caught me completely off guard. "What? You apologize every time you speak." "I do not. You just apologized." I blinked. She was right. I hadn't even realized. Rachel smiled gently. "You've spent so long trying not to inconvenience anyone that you've convinced yourself you're invisible." Nobody had ever described me so accurately. It was terrifying. A month later, she found me alone backstage after rehearsals. "I need your help." "What kind of help?" She hesitated. "Our lead actress broke her ankle." "Oh, the performance is in 12 days. I frowned. "Can't you replace her?" "We've tried." Silence. Then she looked directly into my eyes. "I have another idea. I suddenly felt nervous. What idea? Rachel took a slow breath. I want you to play the role. I laughed. She didn't. You're serious? Completely. I've never acted. You know every scene. I've never been on stage. You've watched every rehearsal. I'm a guy. The audience won't know. I stared at her. Surely this was some kind of joke. I'm not doing that. You haven't even thought about it. I don't need to. Rachel folded her arms. You've spent your entire life hiding. Her voice wasn't cruel, just honest. What if pretending to be someone else is exactly what finally helps you discover who you really are? I wanted to say no. I should have said no. Instead, for reasons I couldn't explain, I found myself asking the one question that changed everything. What would I have to do? Rachel smiled, but there was something unreadable behind her expression. Meet me tomorrow after class. As she walked away, I looked toward the costume racks lining the walls. For the first time, one dress seemed to be waiting for me. The hardest part wasn't putting on the dress. It was seeing a stranger in the mirror and wondering why I couldn't look away. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Rachel's question echoed in my head. What if pretending to be someone else is exactly what finally helps you discover who you really are? It sounded impossible, absurd, yet somehow, I still showed up. The university theater was almost empty on Friday afternoon. The distant sounds of carpenters building stage scenery echoed through the halls as I walked toward the costume department. Rachel was already waiting. On the table beside her lay a script, a notebook, and several garment bags. You came, she said with a warm smile. I almost didn't. I know. She handed me a bottle of water. Nervous? I think I'm about to embarrass myself. Rachel laughed softly. That's usually the first step toward growing. She led me into a quiet rehearsal room lined with full-length mirrors. The walls were covered with photographs of past productions. Actors, actresses, students transformed into completely different people through costume and performance. Rachel noticed me staring. Do you know the secret? What secret? She pointed toward one photograph. None of them looked like that before rehearsals began. I frowned. They all believed they couldn't play their roles. And they stopped trying to be themselves. She opened the first garment bag. Inside hung a simple blue summer dress. Nothing extravagant. No glitter. No dramatic design. Just something the main character would naturally wear. It's only a costume, Rachel said. Nothing more. I nodded. Even then, my hands were shaking. I'll wait outside while you change. What if I can't do it? She smiled kindly. Then you walk out wearing exactly what you're wearing now. No pressure. No pressure. She closed the door behind her. Silence filled the room. I looked at the dress, then at myself in the mirror. For several minutes, neither of us moved. Finally, I reached for the hanger. The fabric felt surprisingly soft. I reminded myself this wasn't about becoming someone else. It was acting. Just acting. I changed into the costume piece by piece, feeling awkward with every movement. When I finally turned toward the mirror, I froze. The reflection looking back wasn't convincing. Not even close. I still looked like Ethan wearing theater clothes. Yet something felt different. Not because I suddenly looked feminine. Because I looked vulnerable. Like someone who had stepped outside the identity he'd hidden behind for years. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Ethan, you can come in. Rachel entered quietly. She studied me for several seconds. I braced myself for laughter. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully. Good. Good. You're uncomfortable. I'm extremely uncomfortable. Perfect. I blinked. Why is that perfect? Because the character you're playing is nervous too. Rather than focusing on appearance, Rachel began teaching me the role. Forget the costume. Forget the mirrors. Who is she? We spent hours reading dialogue, discussing emotions, understanding motivations. Every time I instinctively lowered my voice or looked at the floor, Rachel stopped me. Your character believes she deserves to be heard. Again, lift your head. Again, look at the person you're speaking to. Again, don't apologize before every sentence. I hadn't realized how often I did that. As rehearsals continued over the next week, something unexpected happened. The costume became less important. Instead, I became fascinated by the confidence of the character herself. Rachel explained that good acting wasn't imitation. It was empathy. If you understand someone's fears, she told me, you stop judging them. For the first time in years, I stopped judging myself quite so harshly. The makeover remained simple. Stage makeup to help facial expressions show beneath bright lights. A neatly styled wig matching the original actress's hairstyle. Comfortable shoes suited to the performance. Nothing designed to fool people outside the theater. Everything existed to support the story. Rachel constantly reminded me of that. This isn't about changing who you are. It's about discovering parts of yourself you've been too afraid to show. Still, the mirror continued to challenge me. Each rehearsal I stood before it a little longer. Not admiring, not pretending, simply observing. The frightened boy who'd arrived a week earlier was beginning to stand a little straighter, speak a little louder, smile a little more naturally. Rachel noticed. So, what? When was the last time you apologized? I thought about it. I don't remember. She grinned. Progress. Opening night arrived faster than I expected. The theater buzzed with nervous excitement. Audience members filled the seats. Backstage, actors hurried between costume racks and makeup stations. My heart pounded, so hard I could barely hear anything else. Rachel found me standing alone behind the curtain. Scared. I feel sick. She placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Good actors aren't fearless. They perform despite fear. The stage manager called places. The lights dimmed. The curtain began to rise. Rachel leaned closer and whispered one final sentence. When you step onto that stage, don't try to be someone else. Simply stop hiding. As the audience erupted into applause, I took my first step into the spotlight, completely unaware that someone sitting in the third row had just recognized me. The applause should have been the happiest moment of my life. Instead, the first familiar face I saw made my heart stop. The stage lights were blinding. For the first few minutes, I couldn't see the audience at all. It was just me, my fellow actors, and the story we'd rehearsed for nearly 2 weeks. My first line came. My voice trembled. Then the second line. The trembling faded. By the middle of the first scene, something unexpected happened. I wasn't thinking about the costume anymore. I wasn't thinking about whether people were judging me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about myself at all. I was simply telling a story. The audience laughed at the funny moments. They fell silent during the emotional ones. Every reaction gave me a little more confidence. Rachel watched quietly from the wings, occasionally giving me an encouraging nod. Whenever panic threatened to return, I remembered her words. Stop hiding. So I did, little by little, scene by scene. When the final curtain fell, the theater erupted into applause. The cast joined hands and stepped forward for one last bow. I hesitated. Rachel gently nudged me. Go. I walked to the front of the stage. Hundreds of people stood, clapping. Some even whistled. It wasn't for Ethan. It wasn't even entirely for the character I'd played. It was for the courage it had taken to step onto that stage at all. A warmth spread through my chest unlike anything I'd ever felt. Maybe I wasn't invisible after all. Backstage became a whirlwind of celebration. Students hugged one another. Flowers appeared from proud families. Everyone talked at once. I slipped quietly toward the dressing room, hoping to change before anyone noticed me. Then someone called my name. Ethan, not Rachel, not another actor. A voice from my past. I turned slowly. Standing in the doorway was Noah Bennett. Noah and I had gone to secondary school together. We'd never been close friends, but we'd shared enough classes that he definitely knew who I was. He stared for a second before smiling. I knew it was you. My stomach dropped. You recognized me? The moment you started speaking. I looked down, suddenly embarrassed. I guess I wasn't very convincing. No. He laughed. You were convincing. You just still sound like Ethan. I couldn't help smiling. I had no idea you acted, Noah continued. I don't. You just did. I was filling in. Well. He folded his arms. You were brilliant. The compliment caught me off guard. People had complimented the performance. This felt different. It felt personal. I've never seen you look that confident before. I didn't know what to say. because neither had I. Rachel appeared beside us carrying 2 bottles of water. There you are. She noticed Noah. Oh, am I interrupting? No, Noah said. I was just congratulating your lead actor. Rachel smiled proudly. I told him he could do it. I didn't believe her, I admitted. She laughed. I know. The 3 of us spoke for nearly 20 minutes. Mostly about the play, future productions, university life. For the first time, I found myself contributing to the conversation without rehearsing every sentence in my head first. Rachel noticed. She always noticed. As Noah finally prepared to leave, he turned back toward me. There's a student theater festival in 3 months. I nodded. They're looking for new actors. I smiled politely. I don't think so. He shrugged. I think you should. Then he disappeared into the crowd. Rachel leaned against the doorway. You know. What? That conversation was different. How? You weren't apologizing. I blinked. She was right. Again. Instead of worrying about saying the wrong thing, I'd simply talked. It felt strangely natural. The dressing room slowly emptied. I removed the wig, washed away the stage makeup, changed back into my usual clothes. When I finally looked into the mirror, Ethan was staring back at me. The same brown hair, the same nervous eyes, the same quiet expression. Yet, something had shifted. Not on the outside. Inside. For the first time in years, I didn't dislike the person looking back. Rachel walked in carrying a small envelope. I have something for you. What is it? She handed it over. Inside was a photograph taken during the final bow. I was smiling, genuinely smiling. I couldn't remember the last photograph of myself where that had happened. Keep it, Rachel said. For what? So, the next time you convince yourself you can't do something, you'll have proof that you're wrong. As I tucked the photograph safely into my backpack, my phone vibrated. A message. Unknown number. You were incredible tonight. I hope this isn't the last time you step onto a stage. Noah. I smiled despite myself. Then another notification appeared. This one had no name, no profile picture, just a single sentence. Some people don't like seeing secrets revealed. Be careful who you trust. The smile vanished. I read the message again, then again. A cold chill ran down my spine. Someone had been watching me, and whoever they were, they knew far more about me than they should. There was no name, no profile picture, no previous messages, just that one sentence. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Rachel noticed immediately. What happened? I turned the screen toward her. She read the message twice. Then her confident smile disappeared. Did someone from the cast send this? I don't know. She handed my phone back. Probably someone trying to be funny. Do you think so? I hope so. It was the first time since we'd met that Rachel sounded uncertain. That night I barely slept. Every sound outside my bedroom window made me sit upright. Every notification made my heart race. I kept replaying the performance in my head. Had someone recognized me? Had I embarrassed myself? Was the message connected to the play? Or to me? The next morning I arrived on campus earlier than usual. Students hurried between lectures, laughing and chatting as though nothing unusual had happened. For everyone else, life continued normally. For me, everything felt different. I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. Rachel found me sitting alone outside the theater building. You look exhausted. I didn't sleep. She sat beside me. I spoke to the stage manager, and no one admitted sending the message. That doesn't mean anything. No, she sighed. It doesn't. For several moments we sat in silence. Finally she asked, "Can I tell you something?" I nodded. When I first met you, I thought you were afraid of people. Weren't you right? She smiled gently. I don't think so anymore. What do you mean? I think you're afraid of being judged. The words landed harder than I expected, because they were true. Every decision I'd ever made had been filtered through one question. What will people think? Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out a folded flyer. It advertised the upcoming National Student Theater Festival. I know you already said no. I did. But I'd still like you to think about it. I laughed nervously. Rachel, you spent 19 years believing you couldn't stand on a stage. You proved yourself wrong. What else might you be wrong about? Before I could answer, another voice interrupted us. Ethan, I turned. Noah jogged across the courtyard carrying 2 coffees. I guess you'd be here. He handed one to me. You keep buying me coffee. You looked like you needed one. Rachel smirked. I like him already. Noah laughed. So, he looked at me. Have you thought about the festival? You two planned this? Rachel looked completely innocent. I have no idea what you're talking about. You absolutely do. She couldn't hide her grin. Over the next hour, the 3 of us talked about acting. Not costumes, not appearance, just storytelling, characters, confidence. For the first time, I realized something. When people discuss my performance, they almost never mention that I'd played a female character. They talked about the emotions, the dialogue, the performance itself. I'd spent weeks worrying about the wrong thing. As Noah left for class, he paused. My drama club is meeting tomorrow. I looked confused. I'm not a member. You don't have to be. I don't think I'd fit in. He smiled. Neither did I.
Then he walked away. Rachel watched him disappear. He seems nice. He does. You trust him. I barely know him. Sometimes that's enough. I wasn't sure I agreed. After the anonymous message, trust suddenly felt much more complicated. That afternoon I returned to the costume department to help organize wardrobes. Everything looked exactly as it always had. Rows of dresses, coats, uniforms, shoes. Only now they no longer seemed mysterious. They were simply tools that helped actors tell stories. As I worked, I noticed one garment bag hanging by itself. Attached was a handwritten label. Rachel. Curious, I unzipped it. Inside wasn't a costume. It was an ordinary navy blue dress. Well worn. Neatly pressed. Definitely not part of any production. Rachel entered before I could zip it closed. For a brief second, her expression changed. Almost like panic. Sorry, I said quickly. I thought it belonged to the theater. She gently took the garment bag from my hands. It belongs to me. There was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Sadness. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. She looked down at the dress. I wore this during the hardest year of my life. I waited quietly. My younger sister loved theater. She was supposed to perform in her first lead role. Rachel smiled sadly, but she became seriously ill before opening night. I didn't interrupt. She never got the chance. Rachel carefully zipped the bag closed. So every year, I keep one of her dresses. The room fell silent. For the first time, I realized Rachel wasn't helping me because she enjoyed being in control. She understood what it felt like when fear, or circumstances, stole someone's chance to become who they wanted to be. As I left the theater that evening, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Same unknown number. You're asking the wrong questions. If you want the truth, ask Rachel what really happened 3 years ago. I stopped walking. 3 years ago. I looked back toward the theater building. Rachel stood alone inside, locking the costume room. She looked exactly as she always had. Calm, confident, kind. But for the first time, I couldn't ignore the possibility that there was a part of her past she had never told me about. And somehow, someone wanted me to uncover it.